Hello Trade Pros, this is Victor from Trade Pro Academy, and today we've got another video for you. So today we're going to be talking about how one single stock can affect an entire index. We're going to tie that into futures trading. So let's go ahead and get started. So on my screen here, you guys can see this the S&P 500. We're going to be using three indices as examples today. So the futures on the S&P, the ES, you can see right here on TradingView, ES1 exclamation mark. We're going to be using the NASDAQ and also the YM. We're going to be looking at a few different stocks and how those stocks have affected their respective indices and why. So first, let's go ahead and jump into the composition of those three indices that I just mentioned. Let's start off with the S&P. So right here on my screen, you can see the weight of each company, each stock, each symbol on the S&P 500, and obviously the higher weighted stocks will have more pull in the index. So right here at the top, we've got Microsoft. Moving down, you can see Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Berkshire Hathaway, Johnson & Johnson, Google, and so on, different class shares on Google. So on the S&P, it's a little less drastic than you'll see on the Dow or the NASDAQ, but if a combination of any three or four of these shift systematically together, you can see a pull of the S&P in that direction. But we're going to use some better examples here. So if we go into the NASDAQ and we see again Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, different class Google share, Intel, etc., you can see the top stocks are all technology. So that's where the FANG comes into correlation with the NASDAQ. So why does the FANG move the NASDAQ? Well, it's pretty simple. When you combine the FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, you get about 35.7% weight of the NASDAQ. So that's substantial. When you combine the FANG index and it moves a certain way, if FANG is up, if FANG is down, that will have a significant pull on NASDAQ. And why is that? Because the combined weight of the FANG is a substantial portion on the NASDAQ. So those stocks individually have more pull than others, let's say. So if Microsoft is just ripping, Apple's ripping, Amazon is just ripping, you've got nearly more than 30% actually, right there in those three stocks of weight on the NASDAQ that can pull it higher. So in recent news, unfortunate news, we've had a lot of talk of Boeing engine malfunctions, unnecessary landings, crashes, and so on. And if we go into the Dow Jones and the components of the Dow Jones, you can see number one, Boeing right here, 9.89% of the Dow Jones. It is the highest weighted stock on the Dow Jones, and for that reason can pull the Dow Jones. In recent weeks, recent days, as we'll see in the next screen, the Dow Jones kind of lagged a little behind the other equity indices such as NASDAQ and the S&P to the upside because Boeing was, well, dropping, and it's pretty much 10% of the Dow. So let's correlate Boeing, the Dow, the FANG, NASDAQ, and S&P. So some FANG stocks are on the S&P as well, so you can see a little pull from there. NASDAQ and S&P, all indices are pretty much correlated. Not a one-to-one exactly, but they all tend to move in the same way. So right here, if we go into Boeing and you can see this significant gap lower, this is when the news was announced and the stock dived. So on March 11th, you can see this huge gap lower, and ever since we've got stagnation and more downside on Boeing. So if we take a look at perhaps the Dow versus another equity market like the ES, you'll see that the Dow was a little more sluggish and took to the downside more than the S&P as the S&P was trying to rip. So let's go ahead and look. So we've got both indices here side by side, the ES and the Dow. We got the ES to the left and the Dow on the right. So right here, remember the 11th, we saw an initial divot here, way more pronounced on the Dow market, dropping from this level about here, 25,550, all the way down into the 240s. So a decent 1.2% drop about, while the S&P on the same move, you can see a less substantial drop. You can see 0.42%, so much more pronounced in the Dow, and that's because, well, Boeing got hit. Again, to the upside, you can see just respectively, Dow did move up higher as Boeing made some gains throughout the day, trying to close its gap. S&P just ripped. Very little pullback here on the S&P. Dow, significant pullback as Boeing continued to drop. The upside up into this peak from the bottom here on Dow, almost guarantee it is less significant than that on the ES. So if we grab the bottom of the candle to the top, we've got a 3.2% move in the same time period. If we grab the bottom of the S&P right here and move it up to its peak, we've got an about 5% move. So the move is way less pronounced due to the weakness in Boeing. Again, Boeing isn't the only stock on the Dow, so other stocks contributed to the upside. Now, if we dive into the FANG and we look at similarities between Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and the NASDAQ, you can see the FANG is a very, very strong driver of the NASDAQ, again, being about 36%, 37% of the NASDAQ in weight. All right, on my screen here on the right, we've constructed our own FANG index actually just by combining the symbols here on TradingView, and that is the candlestick chart. On top of that, overlaid in the purple is NASDAQ compared to our 1 hour here on NASDAQ on the left. So you can see when FANG begins to drop, you can see NASDAQ's kind of a lagger in terms. So when it does break the support level right here and continues lower, it pulls NASDAQ with it. Now, when you see a stronger FANG, you could expect a move up in NASDAQ, but to maybe a different degree. You can see right here, NASDAQ couldn't quite break bottoms like the FANG did. FANG dropped 1.7% about, while the NASDAQ only dipped 1.1%. So again, that's because about 35-36% of NASDAQ is the FANG, but the rest is other tech stocks which could have been doing well or could have not dropped as much. So again, there's discretion, but typical strong moves in the FANG do help NASDAQ shift in certain directions. Now, where I was going with this is you can use these correlations and single stock correlation to actually day trade futures. So during the day, if there's huge events like the Boeing mishaps, the Boeing crashes, you could expect a weaker Dow. In other events, when maybe all of the earnings of the FANG index are crazy good and they're amazing things going up, you could expect a stronger NASDAQ and in turn could pull up other equity markets, and that is a great correlation opportunity in the futures market. Again, you could also trade earnings on the futures dependent on the FANG stocks. So this is a little riskier and could not be advised, but is a possibility after our earnings, especially or pre-market earnings when the stock itself isn't open, but the futures market is. When they do announce that, you could see a potential move in NASDAQ based on the FANG stock. So guys, we do this every morning. We talk about these correlations all the time, every day in our live trading room. If you guys are interested, if you like what you hear today, and we do cover the news on specific stocks if they do have a large effect on the indices, check out our live trading room, our live futures trading room, where we do the analysis with you guys right then and right there live. So again, ring that little bell to notify you when we do go live, and check us out every morning. This is Victor from TradePro Academy. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe. Let me know what else you want to see. What is your favorite equity market to trade in the futures market? Let me know. Drop a comment down below.